start by introducing myself. My name is Josef Šíma. I'm president of the Prague Conference of Political Economy, and I have two news for you, a good news and a bad news. The bad news is that this morning I lost my voice. The good news is that PCPE is starting, and I'm not a major speaker here, so I'm pretty sure you will enjoy this wonderful conference which we organize annually in Prague at the end of April. As far as we can tell from last year participants, the conference is becoming a sort of event which hopefully will make Prague once again a center of intellectual development, not only in Central Europe, but perhaps in the whole of Europe. PCPE is an interdisciplinary gathering of scholars who understand the importance of cross-disciplinary research. We especially welcome and encourage the contributions from the following field: law and economics, Austrian School of Economics, history of economics, public choice, economic policy, and economic theory. Close to 100 scholars from all over the world participate annually in this event, and I hope our numbers will be expanding as the conference gets more and more international recognition. However, it's not only you, scholars, who come and deliver your papers which make the conference a very exciting event. The conference would not be possible without the continuing support of our school, and I especially would welcome here the Vice President of School, Mrs. Machková, who is of great encouragement to us to organize events which will make Prague a place where international scholars would like to come to. Also, let me welcome here the Dean of the Faculty of Economics and Public Administration, Dr. Schwartz, who will be invited to the podium in a little while to open up the conference. And also, let me thank for his wonderful work he has done in the recent couple of weeks. And let me introduce to all of you the director of the conference, Martin Froniek, who is over there. Thank you, Martin, for organizing the whole event. And please, if you have whatever problems regarding either organization of the conference, accommodation, or anything else, please approach him. He's ready to help you. Now, let me spend a little time describing to you the program which is ahead of us. As you know, today, the two highlights of Prague Conference are those two named lectures commemorating the heritage of two towering statues of economic science whose lives are bound with the city of Prague, František or Franz Cuhel and Friedrich von Wieser. This will be for today. We have a couple of extra events, a delivery of student prizes, but these two named lectures will be our today's highlights, as I already indicated. As for tomorrow, we have numerous panels, two or often three parallel sessions, where you will present your papers. It's in the classroom by the area where you were. I hope all of you were served sparkling wine a few minutes ago. So we will meet more or less at the same place tomorrow as well, and I hope we will have a very productive day. On Sunday, we are moving all to downtown Prague to have our colloquium on transition with interesting speakers that will open up discussion, and I hope it'll be a real sort of workshop or colloquium so that we discuss what possibly could have done better during the transition processes, viewed from different perspectives from different European countries. You have in your handbook a map how to get to the place, and I would very much encourage you to attend. It'll be just a short meeting on Sunday morning. The facilities of the CEVRO Institut of Political Studies are very beautiful, so it'll be once again an interesting session on Sunday, and that'll be it. We have lunches and dinners where you still which you still can attend. So if you don't have your voucher for dinners or lunches, please go to the desk and ask for it. And I hope that you will find this 3-day of Prague Conference of Political Economy productive, and hopefully we'll have a lot of fun too. Let me now invite to the podium Dr. Jiří Schwarz, the Dean of Faculty of Economics and Public Administration, to open up the conference.
Thank you, Josef, for such marvelous event we'll have in coming 2 days. It's a great pleasure for me to organize and to host such a conference at Prague University of Economics, the conference that is directly linked to the Faculty of Economics and Public Administration. So there is the 3rd course of this conference, and the level is higher and higher. So I am very glad that the faculty members, PhD students take part in the program more and more from year to year. What is very important for us is the link between this conference and our new journal, Prague Perspectives on Political Economy. So this conference, that is the very important basis for that, and the papers, presenters, so they have open space to offer their papers for publication in this journal. We hope that within several years we'll get impact factor on that, and it could be pillar. It could be very necessary pillar for our scientific and research work and for our publication activities. So I am quite sure that today, this afternoon, with 2 excellent speakers, Professor Buchar and Professor Ebeling, we will have a really, will be intellectual, so we'll have very nice intellectual moments with them. And tomorrow with discussion in the session, so it will be very motivating for you for your future research. So I hope you spend 2 nice days in Prague. I hope that the nice weather that we have, that will not be burden for the conference, that you will prefer conference session to sightseeing. So thank you very much for your active participation, and I hope we'll have nice discussion within next 2 days. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Schwartz. František Cuhel is a forgotten, though existing, Czech economist who wrote a book on the theory of needs, which got published in German in 1907, which means that this year we are celebrating 100 years from the first publication of that book. And to contribute to the celebration of this anniversary, we decided to publish first the Czech version, abridged version of the book, which got published earlier in the 20th century in another forgotten Czech journal. So we will make this work by Franz Cuhel available to the Czech readers, and also we are translating the, this abridged version of the book into English so that it can be read by scholars all over the world. František Cuhel, though forgotten here in Prague, made a substantial impact on the face of economic theory because it was exactly him who influenced very heavily Ludwig von Mises and contributed to the development of what Murray Rothbard called Cuhel-Mises theory of utility, which then, through the work of Sir Lionel Robbins, found its way to the mainstream of economic thought and actually created the basis of modern microeconomics. So I guess if the work of František Cuhel is to be celebrated somewhere, it should be exactly here in Prague. First, he worked here, and his life was tied to the city of Prague. And second, we don't have that many important scholars who would contribute to the science of economics, so we should be very grateful to have this František Cuhel and try to build on his crucial and fundamental insights, which actually, as I explained, contributed to the development of modern economics. It is my great pleasure that this year Cuhel Memorial Lecture can be or will be delivered by our dear friend and colleague, Professor Richard Ebeling, who was formerly Ludwig von Mises Professor of Economics at Hillsdale College in Michigan, and currently serves as the president of Foundation for Economic Education, which is the oldest American institution which is connected to the names, to those famous names such as Henry Hazlitt, Leonard Reed, Ludwig von Mises, or Friedrich von Hayek. Richard Ebeling is also the man who discovered the treasure, Ludwig von Mises' library that got confiscated in Vienna by the Nazis, and then found and captured by a Russian KGB, brought to Moscow, and got stuck to an archive where I guess nobody really knew where it was. And it is thanks to Richard Ebeling that we can once again read great papers that were never published by Ludwig von Mises, and see that he was not only a great economic theoretician, but also has a lot to contribute to economic policy discussion. So now I would like to invite to the podium Richard Ebeling and hand him over Franz Cuhel Prize for outstanding contribution to economic education. Richard?
Thank you very much. Thank you. It's a great honor and pleasure to be here. As Joseph said, while the Austrian School is identified with Austria, The fact is the Austrian school emerged when it was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, which included the Czech lands, whether all Czechs wanted to be part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire at that time or not. And that meant that among the institutions of higher learning that were part of the network of the Austrian system was the University of Prague. I believe at that time most classes were taught in German, not Czech. And as a result, people were assigned professorships here from Austria in the more narrow sense. And that resulted in people such as Cuhel and Wieser for long periods of time teaching and residing in Prague and the Czech land. And through that, they had an impact on spreading Austrian economics both here and in their writings while they were here to the rest of the world. It is really a great pleasure to be invited to give this memorial lecture. As Joseph said, Cuhel's works on utility theory did have a major impact on the formulation of modern contemporary microeconomics. For those of you who may not be familiar with it, most economists following the beginning of the marginalist revolution that replaced the older classical labor theory of value believed, or at least in their expositions took as a working assumption for purposes of exposition, the idea that utility was measurable, that it could be a cardinal number. And now you could measure utility, you could compare utilities in some quantitative sense. And Cuhel was one of the first, and indeed one of the most persuasive and detailed in his book, to argue that by necessity, utility and the intensity of satisfactions or pleasures or enjoyments were an intensive, non-measurable magnitude. States of mind that could be compared, more, less, and so on, but that it was not a measurable magnitude. And so his contribution helped build the tradition in modern microeconomics that is the basis of what economists will ordinal utility theory. And it is the foundation, in spite of different approaches among economists, for utility theory even today. Well, when Cuhel wrote his book, that was at a time when the Austrian school and its contributors were among the leading figures on the scene of economic theory and policy. They went into an eclipse, which I'll briefly refer to. And indeed, the Austrian School of Economics only saw its revival approximately 30 years ago, during the week of June 15th to the 22nd, 1974, when the Institute for Humane Studies, a nonprofit educational organization in the United States, when the Institute for Humane Studies sponsored a conference on Austrian economics for about 40 participants in the small town of South Royalton in the state of Vermont. In 1974, the Austrian school had been in hiatus for almost a quarter of a century. For more than 60 years before the 1940s, the Austrian economists had been considered some of the most original contributors to economic theory and policy. They were among the leading developers of the theory of marginal utility, opportunity cost, value and price, capital and interest, markets and competition, money in the business cycle, and comparative economic systems, capitalism versus socialism versus the interventionist welfare state. But the rise and the triumph in the late 1930s and 1940s of the Keynesian explanation of and prescription for the Great Depression eclipsed all competing approaches to the problems of economic depression and high unemployment. This included the Austrian theory of the business cycle, which, in the early 1930s, had been a leading alternative to the emerging Keynesian macroeconomics. At the same time, there developed what came to be called the new neoclassical approach to microeconomics, the study of the logic of individual decision-making, the allocation of scarce resources among competing uses, and the distribution of income among the factors of production, land, labor, and capital, became increasingly an exercise in mathematical optimization under conditions of various quantitative constraints. The focus of attention was on the specification and determination of the narrow and often highly artificial conditions under which a market economy would be in a hypothetical general equilibrium. Now, this too was in stark contrast to the approach of almost all the Austrian economists, who attempted to explain the logic and processes of market competition in a world of constant change. The Austrians, unlike their neoclassical rivals, emphasized imperfect knowledge, the pervasive role of time in all market decision-making, and the nature of market coordination under continual adaptation to changing circumstances. 8 months before that conference in South Royalton, in October 1973, the most important contributor to Austrian economics in the 20th century, Ludwig von Mises, had died at the age of 92. The second most prominent member of the Austrian school at that time, Friedrich Hayek, had been invited to attend the conference, but had declined due to health problems that made it impossible for him to travel to America from Europe. No one at the conference in June of 1974 anticipated that only 4 months later, in October of 1974, Hayek would be awarded the Nobel Prize in Economics. The speakers at that conference were three other leading figures in Austrian economics. Ludwig M. Lockmann, who had studied with Hayek at the London School of Economics after leaving Germany in the 1930s. Israel M. Kirzner, who had studied with and written his dissertation under Mises at New York University in the late 1950s. And Murray N. Rothbard, who had attended Mises's New York University seminar for many years, beginning in the late 1940s, and had received his own doctoral degree in economics from Columbia University. Now, one evening during this conference, Milton Friedman came down from his summer home in Vermont to join us for dinner and to make a few remarks after the meal. Friedman commented that he was delighted to be with us and recalled that he had long known both Mises and Hayek, having been a founding member of the Mont Pelerin Society and having been present with them at the first meeting in Switzerland in April 1947. But what stood out in his remarks for many of us was his statement that there were no different schools of economics. There was only good economics and bad economics. And clearly, therefore, in Friedman's mind, we were on a fool's errand, attending a conference on something called Austrian economics. Yet most of us attending that conference did not consider ourselves on a fool's errand. We just considered Austrian economics to be good economics. At the most fundamental level, Austrians see the individual as an acting man. This was already clearly stated by Mises in 1933, in which he said in one of his early methodological essays, quoting him, "In our view, the concept of man is, above all else, the concept of the being who acts. Our consciousness is that of an ego who is capable of acting and does act. The fact that our deeds are intentional makes them actions. Our thinking about men and their conduct, and our conduct toward men and toward our surroundings in general, presuppose the category of action." Now, this Austrian view of man, intentional, purposeful, acting man, this Austrian view of man, I would argue, refutes the positivist, historicist, and neoclassical conceptions of man as a mere physical quantitative object, or as a passive subject controlled by dark forces of history, or as a mere dependent variable in a system of mathematical equations. Positivism tried to reduce man and his mind to mere magnitudes to be studied and manipulated like the inanimate matter experimented on in the natural sciences. Historicism claimed that man is determined and molded by external laws of history that shape his thoughts, actions, and destiny, with little latitude for the individual to design or guide his own future. Neoclassical economics treats man like a mathematical function, possessing tastes and preferences, which are themselves induced by his surroundings, and on the basis of which he responds in predictable ways when confronted with various constraining and objective trade-offs in the form of market prices. Now, for Austrians, on the other hand, man is a purposeful being. He thinks, plans, and acts. Man may be made of matter, but he possesses consciousness. He has the capacity to imagine, create, initiate. His mind is not simply reducible to lifeless matter. He has spirit and will. Man reflects on the circumstances in which he finds himself. He judges aspects of his physical and social surroundings as being less than satisfactory. He imagines states of affairs that would be more to his liking. He creates in his mind plans of action that would bring those preferred states of affairs into existence. He discovers that the things he can use as means to achieve some of his ends are insufficient to achieve all of his ends. In other words, he has to weigh the alternatives, decide what he prefers more, since some of them, in the face of scarcity, will have to be foregone today or perhaps forever. He therefore has to decide the trade-offs that he will make, and as a result, he determines the costs of his own choices in the form of goals he is willing to give up in order to pursue others that he considers more important. Those ends and means that neoclassical economics tends to take as given are, in fact, created and compared in the actor's mind. They change and are modified as man experiences successes and failures. They are not static. Nor is man a helpless victim or captive of history. He makes his own history by reflecting on what has happened in the past and mentally projecting himself into a possible future. He decides what past course of action is worth trying to continue or what might be a better course as he looks ahead. This is why Mises insisted that in every man there is an element of entrepreneurship. In all of his actions, man searches for and creates profitable opportunities to improve his lot and tries to avoid losses, that is, circumstances worse than they need to be. By necessity, man is therefore a speculator in everything he does. I was lecturing all morning, and so my throat is a little dry. Creating profitable opportunities, avoiding losses, are concepts that have no meaning in the traditional neoclassical conception of perfect competition, in which every market participant is assumed to possess perfect or sufficient knowledge of all possibilities that might be relevant to his decisions. What is the meaning of opportunities discovered or losses avoided when the actors already know from the beginning what are the best and indeed the only options that must be followed, given perfect or sufficient knowledge of all relevant circumstances? From the Austrian perspective, to choose is to select from alternatives. And to select from alternatives must mean that, at least from the individual's perspective, the future is not preordained. If that future is not preordained, but can be influenced by the choices he makes, then perfect knowledge is logically inconsistent with the very concept of an acting and choosing man. Otherwise, man would know already all the decisions he will have to make and their necessary outcomes. But if we assume that, then what remains of any commonsensical notion of choice? Even if we assume only knowledge of objective probabilities and not absolute certainties about the future, every man would still know what is the precise set of options from which he has to choose, and the exact weight he should assign to each possible outcome. And then, given his tastes and preferences for risk, he would again know from the start the only courses of action he could and should logically follow based upon the known probabilities. Now, many neoclassical economists may despair of a world in which imperfect knowledge and uncertainty prevail, a world in which their mathematically deterministic models lose their force. But for Austrians, this reality of the human condition is a reason for optimism about man and his world. The fact that man does not know for certain what the future holds in store, including what his own future actions may be, means that the world in which he lives is one of wondrous possibility. Individuals have incentives to experiment with creative new ideas precisely because they don't know for sure or with any probabilistic degree of certainty how those ideas may actually turn out. It is this element of uncertainty about the future that permits imagination and action to influence the shape of things to come, including all the advancements in the social, economic, and cultural condition of mankind. For the neoclassical economists, the market is reduced to a series of simultaneous equations of supply and demand functions, the properties of which specify whether a general equilibrium solution exists for the market as a whole and whether that solution is unique and stable. Prices are thought of as the quantitative ratios of exchange at which goods may be bought and sold, and which objectify the trade-offs for which the alternatives in the market may be obtained. Likewise, the theory of comparative advantage in the neoclassical framework merely determines the relative opportunity costs of potential trading partners, so they may assume their highest valued roles in the division of labor. In addition, property rights, money, and the social and political institutions are usually treated as givens in neoclassical analysis. They are merely the context in which the supply and demand functions interact. Now, for Austrians, the essence of the market is missed when reduced to a skeletal representation in the form of mathematical functions. The market is where the minds and the meanings of men meet. It is the place where the plans of multitudes of individuals overlap, enabling people mutually to improve their situations through discovered and created gains from trade. It is where the wants of men find greater degrees of satisfaction than in isolated self-sufficiency, and where achieving things never conceived of before is made practicable. In the Austrian conception of the market, prices are not simply quantitative ratios of exchange. They are also the encapsulation of the market participants' valuations and appraisements, which result from the participants buying and selling. Karl Menger, the founder of the Austrian School, expressed this already in 1871 when he said the following: "Prices are by no means the most fundamental feature of the economic phenomena of exchange. This central feature lies rather in the better provision two persons can make for the satisfaction of their needs by trade. Prices are only incidental manifestations of these activities, symptoms of an economic equilibrium between the economies of individuals, and consequently are of secondary interest for the economic subjects. The force that drives prices to the surface is the ultimate and general cause of all economic activity. And what is that? The endeavor of men to satisfy their needs as completely as possible to better their economic positions." In neoclassical theory, prices are usually taken as given, with any changes coming somehow from the outside, with market participants responding accordingly. In the Austrian approach, prices emerge out of the interactions of the market actors. They initiate price bids and offers and competitively move prices up and down. In Eugen von Bombaverk's famous horse market, any resulting equilibrium from suppliers and demanders arises out of their efforts to attract trading partners by offering better terms than their rivals. Thus, the Austrian focus is on the logic and sequential process of price formation, rather than on any final equilibrium price that may result from this active market rivalry. It is why one prominent member of the Austrian school referred to the Austrian theory of price as a causal genetic approach. The purpose of the theory is to explain the causal origin of price in the evaluations and actions of the market actors, and the process by which prices may adjust to a final equilibrium. The theory is also the basis for the later Austrian emphasis on the role and significance of the entrepreneur. In the division of labor, entrepreneurs are not only the undertakers of enterprises who imagine the patterns of future consumer demand, conceive of ways of organizing production processes to better satisfy that demand, oversee the stages of production to the completion of finished goods, and bring the goods to market. They also set and change consumer prices when they discover that they have over or underestimated how intensely consumers want those goods. It is the promoting and speculating entrepreneurs who, as Mises expressed it, are the driving force of the market. Their social function is to coordinate the use of resources, capital, and labor with the demands of consumers through the rewards of profits and the penalties of losses. Again, as Mises concisely expressed it, it is the entrepreneurial decision that creates either profit or loss. It is mental acts, the mind of the entrepreneur, from which profits ultimately originate. Profit is a product of the mind, of success in anticipating the future state of the market. It is a spiritual and an intellectual phenomenon. The intentionality of entrepreneurship, the creative mental processes that are the essence of the enterpriser's activities, are drained of all understanding if the market is reduced to a simplified and barren mathematical function. The social institutions of private property and monetary exchange are not simply conceptual backdrops to the determination of equilibrium prices and outputs, as has tended to be the view traditionally in neoclassical economics. In the standard textbooks from which most economists learn the core concepts of their discipline, private property is described as an incentive mechanism for work and the conserving of scarce resources. And money is explained as a unit of account that serves as a common denominator for comparing the value of goods bought and sold in the market. Now, both of these descriptions, property as an incentive mechanism, money as serving as a valuable unit of account as a numeraire, both these descriptions are true and important. But they fail to capture the institutional profundity for the functioning and coordinating of the complex and ever-changing market order. Private property and money are instead the core, the indispensable features of the market economy and the civilization that develops with it. The evolution of private property rights and a medium of exchange have made possible the economic calculation without which rational market decision-making would be impossible. Again, it is Mises who articulated this most clearly. Let me quote a few sentences. Monetary calculation, Mises says, is the guiding star of action under the social system of division of labor. It is the compass of the man embarking upon production. He calculates in order to distinguish the remunerative lines of production from the unprofitable ones. Monetary calculation is the main vehicle of planning and acting in the social setting of a society of free enterprise directed and controlled by the market and prices. We can view the whole market, Mises continues, as a market of material factors of production and labor, as a public auction. The bidders are the entrepreneurs. Their highest bids are limited by their expectation of the prices the consumers will be ready to pay for the products. The competition between the entrepreneurs reflects these prices of consumers' goods in the formation of the prices of the factors of production. To the entrepreneur of capitalist society, a factor of production through its price sends out a warning. Don't touch me. I am earmarked for the satisfaction of another, more urgent need, unquote. Only private property enables all marketable commodities and means of production to be available for sale and purchase in the arena of exchange. Only a medium of exchange provides the means by which heterogeneous things may be reduced to a valuational common denominator. Only the competitive market enables every participant in society to contribute to the formation of prices through his bids and offers. Only economic calculation enables the integration of billions of people's actions into a network of mutually beneficial market relationships and coordinated plans. Yet every man is free to make his own decisions, guided by his own hopes, dreams, goals, and plans. The money prices that make economic calculation possible are used by each individual for his own purposes. He weighs their significance for the ends he has in mind. He uses them to evaluate his past actions and to plan his future actions. He is at liberty to integrate himself into the division of labor on the basis of his own evaluations of the costs and benefits of alternative courses of action, while bearing the consequences, good or bad, from the choices he makes. It is through economic calculation in the free market that individual freedom is made compatible with social order. It is through economic calculation that billions of individual plans are combined in patterns and rational social coordination. No wonder that Mises concluded that, quote, our civilization is inseparably linked with our methods of economic calculation. It would perish if we were to abandon this most precious intellectual tool of acting, unquote. Austrians also see more in the theory of division of labor and comparative advantage than simply the determination of specialization at various prices given the capital and labor available. Once again, it was Mises who insightfully clarified the implications of the 18th and 19th century classical economists' view on the benefits of division of labor. The theory of the division of labor, Mises explained, is really the basis of what he called the law of human association, and therefore the foundations of a theory of society. Based on Adam Smith's and David Ricardo's expositions of the benefits from division of labor and specialization, it was possible to show how society emerged and took form over the centuries as the result of individuals discovering these mutual benefits from trade. The additional gains through specialization resulted in an expanding network of human relationships. The theory of the division of labor, therefore, is able to serve as the analytical tool for explaining the emergence of society as the result of human actions, but not of human design. As Mises explained the process, quoting him once again, the law of association makes us comprehend the tendencies which resulted in the progressive intensification of human cooperation. We conceive what incentive induced people to not consider themselves simply as rivals in a struggle for the appropriation of limited supplies of means of subsistence made available by nature. We realize what impelled them and permanently impels them to consort with one another for the sake of cooperation. Thus, we are in a position to comprehend the course of human evolution through understanding this deeper logic of division of labor. The theory of the division of labor and comparative advantage, therefore, becomes the basis of a science of society. A foundation is laid for the theory of market relationships, the interconnection between supply and demand, and the network of market prices for finished goods and the factors of production. The way is open to understanding the inevitable laws of the market and exchange, which is one of the greatest achievements of human understanding. Out of the classical economist theory of the division of labor, there now comes the classical liberal philosophy of peace and social cooperation, which is the basis for the astonishing development of the economic civilization of our age. The greater material productivity of a peaceful division of labor, Mises explained, provides the means for the development of all that we call civilization. The means are now provided for leisure and the peace of mind that are required for art, literature, and scientific and philosophic reflection, which man never had before the modern intensification and development of division of labor, when for most of human history, most of mankind eked by at barely the subsistence level. Through this process of civilization emerging through intensified division of labor, man increasingly becomes differentiated one from another. not only in the sense of specialized tasks and skills through which they find their place in the division of labor. They also differentiate themselves by developing their individual personalities, thanks to the greater abundance of resources and free time with which they can now cultivate the pursuits that most interest them. Individualism, meaning man as distinct from the tribal mass and unique in his character and qualities as a singular human being, is a product of the extension and the intensification of the division of labor. At the same time, the division of labor and its law of association are the foundations for a philosophy of world peace. Through specialization and exchange, men become allies against the scarcities of nature. No longer are individuals and nations opponents, where the improvement of one requires a loss to another. Instead, all benefit from everyone's talents, industry, and creativity. Competition, both within and between nations, is no longer a life and death struggle. The competitive market process becomes the peaceful procedure through which each member of society finds his most productive and profitable niche for improving his own circumstances by furthering the ends of others. And again, once more, Mises captured the essence of this great social process. He said, all collaborate and cooperate, each in the particular role he has chosen for himself in the framework of the division of labor, competing in cooperation and cooperating in competition. All people are instrumental in bringing about the overall result. That is, the price structure of the market, the allocation of the factors of production to the various lines of want satisfaction, and the determination of the shares of the individual. The world, therefore, becomes one community of free men who, though separated by time, space, and interest, are peacefully guided to assist one another by the information and incentives supplied by market prices. People's buying and selling determine the patterns of production that best serve the ends and needs of all humanity. The market economy, in other words, thus is the means to the peaceful unity of mankind. None of these Austrian insights about man and the market are compatible with the positivist, historicist, and I would even argue many of the neoclassical economic views of the world. Reduced to physical object or mathematical function, man is stripped of his most essential human qualities. What are intention and imagination, choice and creativity, if the human mind is banished from social and economic analysis? What meaning, therefore, does freedom have when a man is merely a measured magnitude or a dependent variable in a system of simultaneous equations? It should not be surprising, therefore, that so many members of the Austrian School of Economics have also been classical liberals, defenders of individual liberty, private property, and the market economy. Once you see the individual as a thinking, creating, and acting man with so much potential within him, who can tolerate the idea of making him a slave to another person's will, of denying him his humanness? Once you comprehend the majesty of the spontaneous, coordinated market order, in which each man is free to follow his own plans while advancing the welfare of others, who could want to restrict him to the dictates of a central planner or a political intervener? Once one understands the significance of prices for social coordination within the market process, who can presume to have the knowledge and ability to command humanity's consumption and production? It is no wonder, therefore, that so many of freedom's friends have been influenced by the Austrian economists. In the last 100 years, they have been among the true political economists of liberty. The Austrian School of Economics has enriched our understanding of the market economy and advanced the cause of freedom in our time. Thank you very much. Time for any questions or comments? Thoughts, reflections, ruminations on the meaning of life? What good movies you've seen lately? Any of you seen the new Bond movie? No questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Ebeling, for your outstanding lecture. I hope I still have some voice left. Now, let me invite to the podium our dear friend and colleague, Professor of Law and Economics, Pierre Garello, who is here as a representative of IREF and came to Prague to announce the winners of the essay contest. So Pierre, please come to the podium.
Yes, thank you, Joseph. It's my pleasure to be here. And as was just said, I'm here first of all as a member and as director of research for an institute called IREF. Now let me tell you a little bit about IREF. The letter stands for Institute for Research on Economic and Fiscal Issues. So that tells you a little bit what we do. It's a private institute which was founded in 2002. It's a European institute in the sense that the associate members of the institute comes from various countries in the EU. It's also interdisciplinary. We are very happy to have on our board economists, but also lawyers. Some of them actually, are practitioners. And the goal of IREF is to promote research on economic and fiscal issues. Now, why do we need such an institute? The idea is that most of the people who work on taxation usually do it at a national level, and most of the time, the European and the competition dimension is not seriously taken into account. So it was important for us to develop and to promote studies that will see taxation, but in the context of competition between different fiscal systems. Now, this, of course, is a work which is partly done by people at the EU Commission, and which was also done by such institute at the OECD. But as it turns out, in 1997, the OECD started to take a strange look on tax competition, and they published a study which make a lot of, start a lot of debate, which was titled "Harmful Tax Competition." So the OECD, official view was that competition was not good as far as fiscal systems is concerned, and that view is also more or less the view of the EU. So we thought that it would be good that on the market of idea there will be like competition, and that some argument in favor of competing fiscal systems should be also presented to a larger public. Now, what do we do at IREF? How do we work? Essentially through three means. One is to ask some experts to prepare study for us, and then we try to spread the study to make them known to again, a larger public. Just to give you some example, 2 years ago we had Patrick Minford, who is a well-known professor in England, who worked for us and gave us a study on the impact of public debt on growth. Another example this year, our colleague, Professor Larsfeld, who is an expert, among other things, on fiscal decentralization, is working on a paper what is on the so-called director's law, after the name of Aaron Directors, who was one of the founder of the law and economics movement. Now, director's law is about who, at point T in a society, who is paying taxes and who is receiving taxes. Okay, so who is benefiting from redistribution and who is paying for it. Aaron Directors' claim was that, in fact, it's the middle class who is benefiting in our modern society of that redistribution scheme. So we have two studies, one by Lars Feld and the other one by our colleague Bertrand Lemenissier from Paris. And then we will be, first having some version of those studies which are, comprehensible to a large public, and we will organize conference. So organizing conference is our second tool that we use extensively at EREF. And then finally, to come to the point, our third tool is to organize an essay contest. Of course, essay contests are organized around issues related to taxation. Now we had already 3 essays contests, and there is a third one. Maybe you saw that flyer. There is a fourth one, I'm sorry, which is just open. So I invite all of you to contribute to that contest. The first essay contest was on the relationship between taxation and growth. The second one was on the relationship between tax and justice, very difficult topic, and we had a very, divergent and very rich essays. And last year, the third essay contest was, we were offering participants to the contest to reflect on wealth tax and various issues relating to taxing wealth. Maybe some of you had that booklet. This presents, the first winning essay contest. And let me say a few words, but that'll be very brief. Of the 2 first winners are here, and they will each one take 10 minutes to present the main ideas that are in their papers. The winner, maybe you can come here, is Dr. Jan Schnellenbach, who come from that very famous and old tradition of fiscalists and fiscal specialists in Germany. Since I've been working on fiscal issue, I've learned that in Germany there is a great richness as far as economists working on those issues. He's from right now the University of Heidelberg, and with, I know, some of our colleagues there. And here we are, Jan, it's in the name of all the EREF board members. Congratulations. And maybe you should stay around. And the second prize went to Philippe Bagus. I don't know if I pronounce that well, who actually is also from Germany, but now studying with our friends in Madrid. So, Philippe, congratulations. We hope at EREF that this will, give you incentive to keep working on fiscal issue. We do believe this is a very important topic. There are, if you look at academic journals, there are people who work on taxation. It will be surely not true to say that there is no economic papers. Actually, if you look at the academic journal, it's full of paper on taxation. But the link between what is in the economic journals and what we can hear on TV or on the radio is sometimes missing, and that richness, which is in academia, is not always, available for the public decision maker, and that's our work, and I hope you will contribute to that. So again, congratulations to both of you. I suggest that maybe Jan, you can start, and then we'll be followed by.
Thanks a lot for your attention. So my paper is on an economic rationale for the wealth tax. Does it exist? And, well, I think Okay, this makes it much easier. So what I want to do is go through some basic rationales for taxing wealth and to critically examine them and to critically discuss them. The first group of arguments are popular arguments, and the second group of arguments are more respectable, you could say, arguments. The first popular argument is the tax base argument, which is nicely summarized in this quote from Mr. Cossar of the globalization skeptical organization ATTAC, who simply states that with very low tax rates and levying a wealth tax, you could basically generate a very large tax revenue, and due to the low tax rates, you could do this with only generating very little, very tiny distortions in the economy. So the basic argument is a low tax rate, reasonably high tax revenue, and a low excess burden, low welfare costs of taxing wealth. Well, a simple argument against this looks a bit neoclassical, and it is. It's a neoclassical standard model, a capital model. Quite simply, if you tax wealth, you could just equivalently tax capital income. And if you do a simple calculation, if you either tax with a wealth tax the present value of current income streams, or if on the other hand, on the right-hand side of the equation, you tax the periodical income streams from this capital stock, you can compare these two, and it's quite easy to show that a very low tax rate on wealth, for example, a 3% tax rate on wealth, is equivalent to a 60% tax rates on capital incomes. So the tax rate argument does not really count. It's a very simple argument. The wealth tax is pretty much equivalent to a capital income tax, and a low tax rate on wealth, on net wealth, is equivalent to a very high tax rate on capital incomes. So the argument of distortion-free taxation is pretty much false. And so despite the large tax base, we have, in fact, a large, even with low tax rates, a large effective tax burden, and we have the problem of the usual distortions that we get when we tax capital incomes. We have too low savings, we have slower economic growth, we have all the problems that we have when we tax capital incomes, we of course also have when we tax wealth, and even if we tax wealth only with very low tax rates. There's another not so respectable argument, and that's the simple efficiency argument. You find it in the economics literature. I was surprised to find it there. But this argument simply says that taxing wealth may increase efficiency in capital utilization, that by taxing wealth, you may set an incentive to private investors to look for more efficient means of investing their incomes. That's indeed a serious argument in the tax-related literature, and I think from a modern economic point of view, it's pretty much, well, not too respectable to simply assume that private individuals, do not have sufficient incentives to look for efficient means of utilizing their capital themselves. I think there are not really good economic reasons for assuming that. So there are more serious arguments. One is that maybe just taxation requires having a wealth tax, that these classical principles of taxation, like the benefits principle and the ability to pay principle, require having a wealth tax in addition to a capital income tax. But again, if we precisely look at these arguments, we see that the benefits principle requires Lindau taxes, which are generally personally differentiated head taxes, and wealth tax really would do nothing for us to come to a more to a better to come to a tax system that better works along the benefits principle. And if we look at the ability to pay principle, there's a simple argument, which is that wealth taxes normally can only tax a physical capital stock or financial capital, but wealth taxes cannot tax human capital. So if you have the idea that according to the ability to pay principle, you think someone who earns more, who owns more, should pay more taxes, then actually if this leads you to levy a wealth tax, then this will actually bring you further away from actually accomplishing the ability to pay principle. Because simply you cannot tax human capital. But economically, it's the same if you generate an income stream from financial capital, from physical capital, or from human capital. But you cannot tax human capital with a wealth tax. So if you have two individuals, one who generates an income stream from a stock of human capital, the other generates the income stream from a stock of financial capital. The problem is quite simply that you discriminate against the one with the human capital, and you discriminate against the one with the financial capital, and the tax system benefits the one with the human capital, but you violate the ability to pay principle if you levy a wealth tax. So even this classical normative benchmark for tax systems won't help us to corroborate levying a wealth tax. Pretty much the same with inequality aversion. If you want to redistribute incomes, the problem is that you can achieve real short-term redistribution with a wealth tax, a real short-term wealth redistribution only with a confiscatory wealth tax, and slowing down unequal wealth accumulation. You can achieve this pretty much at the same rate with a capital income tax or a general income tax. So there's no real reason to levy a tax on wealth. On the contrary, what you do when you levy a tax on wealth is that you endanger private property rights. You tax a stock of wealth regardless if it has carried any yield or not. So you violate, you endanger private property rights, you encroach private property rights with a wealth tax. So this age-old dilemma between slowing down growing inequality and at the same time preserving private property rights, you can solve this dilemma pretty good with an income tax, but you violate basic principles of a market economy by levying a wealth tax. And finally, two other counter-arguments against this this inequality thing is that the data show that most of the top income earners have turned out to be wage earners in the recent decades, at least in the United States. If you think at top sports stars, show stars, investment bankers, these kinds of people, so these are people who generate incomes from their stock of human capital, not from financial wealth or from material wealth. So again, if you introduce a wealth tax, you discriminate against people living off financial or material wealth, and you benefit people who make the living of human capital. And the final point is that maybe a wealth tax, if you substitute it for a capital income tax, then you may have some positive efficiency effects, overall efficiency effects. The crucial point, however, is that you need to substitute it for the progressive capital income tax. You need to do away with the progressive capital income tax and instead introduce a flat wealth tax. And this, some studies have shown, may actually increase the innovation rates simply because you don't face the steep progression in the income tax system anymore. You deal with a flat wealth tax, and this might increase, under some circumstances, the incentives to innovate, to invest into risky, innovative activities. But the problem is all the redistributive effects of a wealth tax that people want generally, they just vanish because this wealth tax substitutes in for a capital income tax and is not levied on top of a capital income tax. So to conclude, it seems to be quite difficult to find any rationale for taxing wealth on top of a capital income tax. There seems to be no good reason from an economic point of view to introduce a wealth tax. On the contrary, pretty much every argument speaks for doing away with a wealth tax where it still exists. Okay, thanks.
Well, good afternoon. Well, let me first thank the contributors of the IRF and the jury to award me the prize. It's a great honor for me, and I'm very happy about it because it's the first prize I ever won, and for me it's a huge amount of money. But let's now see why I got it. Well, the idea of wealth taxes, the appealing and dangerous idea of wealth taxes is just take a little bit from the obscene rich and resolve our revenue problems. In my paper I ask, why should we consider wealth taxes? And are wealth taxes harmful or helpful to an economy? And I proceed as follows. First, I analyze some of the arguments given to justify wealth taxation. And as Dr. Schnellenbach has done this so perfectly already, and there's a lack of time, I will not do this now. And then I compare the effects of wealth taxes with the effects of income taxes. After this, I explore the effects of different wealth taxes upon the economy, such as wealth transfer taxes, property taxes, net wealth taxes, and capital gains taxes. I will then conclude in determining whether we should consider wealth taxation as a viable approach to revenue. Well, wealth taxes versus income taxes. First of all, it must be pointed out that wealth and income taxes, of course, share many characteristics. As Murray Rothbard states, quote, taxation always has a twofold effect. First, it distorts the allocation of resources in the society so that consumers can no longer most efficiently satisfy their want. And second, for the first time, it severs distribution from production. It brings the problem of distribution into being, end quote. But of course, there are important differences between income and wealth taxes. Income taxes reduce an individual's entire living standards. The individual will spend less money on consumption, savings, or additions to his cash balance. While taxes on income have pernicious effects for living standards, taxes on wealth or accumulated capital are even more harmful. Wealth taxes are more harmful because they tax capital stock, which is the source of our present and future income. To visualize the different effects of taxes on wealth and income, let us imagine Robinson Crusoe being subjected to an income tax of 20% by a native tribe on his island. As he collects with his bare hands 10 berries per day, he has to deliver 2 of them to the tribe, which leaves him 8 for his consumption or savings. Assume that he consumes 6 per day and saves 2, then after 1 month he has accumulated 60. And with his usual consumption of 6 berries a day, this enables him to live for 10 days, which we assume is the time period necessary to find a stick and fashion it into a tool, allowing him to collect berries more efficiently. Now, with the help of this tool, he's able to collect 20 berries a day, from which 4, of course, will be taxed by the income tax, away by the tribe. This greatly improves Robinson's standard of living, as he can spend more time on other projects and therefore has to spend only half the day collecting the 10 berries that he had been collecting with his bare hands before. But now imagine that the native tribe begins to tax accumulated capital or wealth. Robinson must now deliver 5 berries every day for just owning his tool. This, of course, discourages the replacement of the tool when it breaks, and also discourages further capital accumulation. Moreover, if the wealth tax had been in place at the beginning of our scenario, Robinson possibly would have never crafted the tool in the first place. And without his tool, Robinson is impoverished. The same is true for our modern society. A wealth tax implies a discouragement of capital replacement and capital accumulation, and an encouragement of capital consumption. It thereby leads to decreases in the quantity and quality of goods produced. In short, society is impoverished. Now let's have a look on the effects of specific wealth taxes. First, wealth transfer taxes. Taxation of bequests and gifts are called wealth transfer taxes. An example is the death tax. A death tax shares all the consequences of wealth taxes and contains especially destructive consequences. One characteristic of the death tax is that large sums of wealth are being taxed. This is so because all accumulated capital in a society has to pass at one point from one generation to the next. Hence, the discouragement of capital accumulation and replacement is also significant. Specifically, a death tax dampens the incentive to save and pass accumulated capital to one's heirs. Moreover, as an important side effect, the death tax penalizes families with future orientation and reduces the time horizon of family entrepreneurs. Furthermore, taxing wealth transfers may generally weaken naturally family ties. Parents tend to consume more of their capital instead of saving for their children. And parents trying to correct their children's misbehavior or conduct by reducing the inheritance have less leverage. And children trying to support their elderly parents are also penalized. The second type of wealth taxes I want to discuss are property taxes. Property taxes are taxes levied upon certain properties of individuals. The unique characteristic of property taxes in relation to other wealth taxes is that tax capitalization is possible. The capitalization process functions as follows. When the tax is installed, it lowers the property value immediately, as the future taxes lowering future returns are anticipated. Entrepreneurs will bid down the property value until investing in it becomes worthwhile in relation to other investments. That is, when the rate of return adapts itself to the prevailing rate of return in the economy. An example. If the prevailing rate of return in the economy is 5% and the 1% tax on the value of houses is levied, entrepreneurs will stop investing in housing, as they would earn only 4% in housing, while they could earn 5% in other lines of production. The capital value of houses will consequently bid down until investing in them earns a 5% rate of return. The tax is capitalized. The main burden of the tax is thus levied on the house owners when the tax is installed. This means that the property tax is one of the lesser distorting wealth taxes. After the impact of its initial blow, the market reduces and cushions its effects. Well, the third type of wealth tax I want to discuss are net wealth taxes. A tax on net worth taxes the differences between an individual's assets and liabilities. As it includes all assets, it cannot be capitalized. As such, the tax on net wealth incorporates the key effect of wealth taxes in its clearest form. Thus, Murray Rothbard once, quote, "It is clear that the wealth tax levies a heavy penalty on accumulated wealth, and that therefore the effect of the tax will be to slash accumulated capital. No quicker route could be found to promote capital consumption and general impoverishment than to penalize the accumulation of capital. Only our heritage of accumulated capital differentiates our civilization and living standards from those of primitive man. and a tax on wealth would speedily work to eliminate this difference. End quote. The last type of wealth taxes I want to talk about are capital gains taxes. A capital gains tax is a tax on realized appreciations on the value of wealth. It only taxes gains on capital investments when the gains are realized. It is thus a punishment on successful investment. It discourages the reinvestment of profits in successful and especially fast-growing projects. In the case of a tax on realized capital gains, a lock-in effect occurs. As investors have to pay capital gains taxes only when the investment is sold, it can become advantageous to keep the investment instead of selling it. The investment is locked in the company. Consequently, the economy becomes more rigid over time, not adjusting to changes and leaving some of the most efficient production combinations unrealized. Conclusion. The effects of wealth taxes on the standard of living within society are much worse than income taxes, as they penalize capital accumulation. As we have seen, wealth taxes lead to a general empowerment of society and a redistribution of wealth. As the redistribution of wealth, a highly questionable aim in itself, could be achieved with less harmful consequences for society, we should advocate abolishing wealth taxes altogether. This in turn will lead to a higher standard of living for society in general. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, both winners, for their presentations. And before I release you for the refreshment, let me just share with you this great news. As always, on the occasion of PCPE, we launched a book. It was a Czech translation of Murray Rothbard's Man, Economy and State 2 years ago. It was the Czech translation of Johan Norberg's In Defense of Global Capitalism last year. And this year, as you can see, and those of you who are Czech can even read, we have a 400-page long book called Economics and Environment, which is a collection of papers by world-leading scholars working in the field of natural resources, including people doing public choice analysis of that field, people doing new resource economics, or people who apply Austrian School of Economics insights. So the book will be for sale outside of this auditorium, and yeah, this is the last thing for the moment. Now the refreshment is to be served, and we'll meet here at 4:15 for Wieser Memorial Lecture. So enjoy the break, and look forward to meeting you in a little while.